Dan Holden, your lead on political research with one of the polling companies here in the UK called Comrade. Now, last night you released a poll, and that's the last poll that you could do before the election. What did that poll say about what the results of the election that's going on right now might be?
So the poll that we put out, which predicts the final vote share, was a 10-point lead for the Conservative Party. Still a very strong lead. You can get a very good majority out of that. But it's notable that at the start of the campaign, we had them on a 25-point lead. That's quite a jump. And that is largely due to an increase in Labour's, more than a fall in the Tories' share of the national vote.
And so that position at the beginning of the polls, that's been eroded for the Tories. Their lead is less than it was. Why is that?
I think that's an interesting point. There's a lack of discipline compared to the 2015 general election campaign. I dare say that has had something to do with it. But also Jeremy Corbyn, although he is still broadly a little more unpopular than Theresa May, has had a very good campaign. He's gone from being very unfavourable to actually doing pretty well. People like his ideas, but crucially, they prefer her as Prime Minister.
Well, we should say that Jeremy Corbyn is the leader of the Labour main opposition, and when he started this campaign he was actually very unpopular, and so was his party. Have they improved since then, and has his personal rating improved?
Absolutely. I mean, we track a lot of personal ratings for party leaders. He's improved a lot since the start of the year, whereas Theresa May, we tested this back in February, she's gone into negative favourability over that time, and she was at the time the only favourable UK politician. I think for her it's been a real change, but at the expense of him. He has done quite well out of it. Whether or not it's good enough, we'll see tomorrow morning.
And so she's become less popular as the election has gone on, and she was very popular beforehand. Is she going to win a big result?
I think so. I mean, they are pitching it purely as a choice between two leaders and about Brexit. And I think a lot of voters, certainly from the polling we've done, understand it in those terms. And on those terms, which are Theresa May's terms, she's winning. People think she'd make a better Prime Minister, and they trust her more with Brexit. And crucially, a lot of former UKIP voters from the last election trust her more with Brexit than they do their natural party. And a lot of them going to the Conservatives is going to push them up in terms of votes and seats in the House, and going to give her a good majority.
And so you mentioned issues there. You mentioned Brexit, and you mentioned personalities. This election, has it been dominated by Brexit?
Less so than I would have expected. I think, like I was saying earlier, the 2015 campaign was very disciplined, it was very rigid, they knew exactly what they were doing. This one I had expected more focus just on Brexit, just on personality, but then they did some more stuff about, the Conservatives more about social care, announced some other different domestic policies. And I think that distracted from the overall drive of their campaign, and perhaps that was to their detriment.
What are the other issues?
The NHS is certainly a big issue. It always is in British politics, and that, in our polling, comes across as the biggest issue. And on that, Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party do well, and they're doing better than they did at the start of the year, and that's very good news for them. But that is overridden by people's perception of who would make a better Prime Minister. This is really a deeper sort of trust thing, and on that basis, Theresa May, even though she's slipped in favourability, she's winning on that basis.
So the weather's quite reasonable, and does that help turnout?
It does. I mean, these small things make a difference. I remember reading that Harold Wilson in the 1960s rang up the boss of ITV to reschedule a popular soap because he thought his working class voters would be inside watching it and wouldn't come out to vote. So these things do make an impact, and rain certainly does have an impact on turnout, but I think the overall story is turnout probably will be a bit lower, and it might be fatigue. This is the third big election in as many years. People may not be as interested, and certainly, although a lot of people are saying loads of young people are going to turn out, not that many did last time, and whether or not, I would be surprised if it was a sudden revolution in young people turning out to vote. So overall, I think turnout would be quite relatively low.
Yeah, your survey last night, which surveyed 2,000 people, that made something of what turnout might be, and are young people going to turn out? So what happens if they do turn out, and what happens if they don't?
If they don't, our model is predicated on sort of historical and demographic data of turnout, essentially, if they behave as they normally have done, they've done in previous elections and previous years, young people won't turn out as much as they say they will, and that'll benefit the Conservatives. If they do turn out, and I would be surprised if they do, frankly, although overjoyed. That will benefit the Labour Party. So I think we will, and that's part of the schism that we have in the moment of polling, is do you take people at their word when they say they're going to turn out, or do you ameliorate that with historical data, which is what we do, and that is why we've got a stronger Conservative lead than other competitors, for example.
And you mentioned earlier that this is the third big vote in 3 years. What have those votes been, and has Britain had 3 big votes in 3 years before?
It's a fair point. So we had the general election in 2015, we had Brexit, the EU referendum last year, and now another general election. They're all very important to the national identity, really say something. The only comparison I can think of was when there were 2 general elections in 1 year in 1974, which was based purely off of not getting a majority in the House for the Labour Party. This is a slightly different thing. We had a new Prime Minister come in off the back of Brexit, and she wants a mandate for her domestic agenda, which perhaps explains why she was going off message a little and talking about things like social care and grammar schools.
And one final question for you, Dan. The election we had last time was about Brexit last year. That was the last big one we had. Party that was really set up for that was UKIP, UK Independence Party. And how did they do that election? How do they look as though they're going to do in this election?
They fulfilled their purpose, in a sense, with the last election. We've done a lot of polling on people who voted UKIP last time, and lest we forget, their whole mission was to get Britain out of the EU. They are unlikely to do as well this time. We have, in our polling, half of the people who voted for them last time going to the Conservative Party. They prefer Theresa May to the leader of the UKIP party, and on that basis they trust her with Brexit. On that basis they're going to go Conservative, and that will benefit the Conservatives massively in terms of seats, because it will push them over the line in key Northern and Midlands marginals. So for UKIP, it's not going to be a very good night, I don't think.
And on that note, Dan Holden, thank you
very much.
So the British electoral system will produce a result tomorrow. And one of the things about the British electoral system... so the British electoral system will produce a result tomorrow. And one of the things about the British electoral system is... So the British electoral system will produce a result tomorrow. And one of the things about the British electoral system is that it usually produces a certain result. You get a strong form of government, which usually rules for about 5 years. That wasn't the case in 2010. And that was a real surprise for everybody. A coalition government was formed then between the Conservatives under David Cameron and the middle party in British politics, which is the smallest main party, the Liberal Democrats. They weren't expected to last 5 years. They weren't expected to keep together and to agree with each other, but they did. And they lasted until 2015. And that was the first coalition government that the UK had had since before the Second World War. Now, the chances of a coalition government after this election, when the results come out tomorrow morning, seem really unlikely. Theresa May in the polls is quite a long way ahead. The main opposition party under Jeremy Corbyn's Labour is quite a long way behind. There could be a gap of up to 100 seats, some people say. Others say 50. But both those results would mean that Theresa May has more MPs in Parliament now and a bigger majority. So that looks as though there's not going to be any chance of a coalition government, and that there's going to be every chance of a stronger government, which is the result that Theresa May was looking for. But on the way, she gambled a lot, and she's lost something too. She was an extremely popular Prime Minister when she chose to hold this election, and the campaign has not been good for her. She's not good at campaigning, and her opponent, Jeremy Corbyn, is good at campaigning. So he's gained on that score, but he may not be able to translate that into seats. But tomorrow morning, we'll know the result. That's all right. It was a good idea. Now, coalition, we'll talk about that. Let's talk about Brexit.
Maybe talk about the impact of the terror attack and the Brexit on this.
Yes, I think so.
Especially the recent terror attack.
Mm.
Especially the latest one.
Mm.
So can you say the place on the road when we are moving towards the police station? What place will be passed?
What now? I can tell you what this is. I can tell you a lot about this church.
Yes, you don't need to appear before camera.
Ah,
Just
good.
say out of camera.
Okay. So I can say a lot about the church, but it's not about politics. Okay, no, I'll talk about church. So this church was built in 1711, finished in 1726. It's one of 11 churches. They cost an enormous amount of money to build, and they were built by the British government to try and improve the status of the church. The English church, the Church of England. This church was built by Thomas Archer. He built 3 other churches, 2 of those, one of those in London and one in Birmingham. The church was bombed in the Second World War by German bombers, and then stopped being a church, and it's now a concert hall. Go this way. This way. This way. Okay, we'll film this building here. Okay. Do you have sound? Good. This building here. That's it. This building here is called Europe House. It's now the headquarters of the European Union in Great Britain. They hold many events here, and this is where they run their press operations from. It has an interesting political history. Up until the 1980s, this building was the headquarters of the Conservative Party. And after successful general elections, this is where new Conservative prime ministers would appear. When Margaret Thatcher won the general election in 1979 and became the first British female prime minister, this was where she was first seen, and she first gave her victory speech. It will be another 10 minutes before we get to the polling station. Yeah. Yeah, 10 minutes. On the way, right. Background for the election or background for the buildings?
The election.
Ah, good.
And we can still repeat something.
Yes.
Which is important.
Yes. Let me think of something. Brexit. Okay. Give me a couple of minutes. I'll think of something. When I say it, do you want me to say it to the camera or will we keep talking while I say it? Okay, I'm going to say something. Okay. Brexit is the main issue that's been hanging over this campaign, but it isn't the main issue for voters. If you ask voters what they're most interested in, the thing voters from all parties are worried about is the National Health Service, the NHS, which is the free health service for all British people. Brits always say that the service is free, but actually it's paid for out of taxes, a special tax called national insurance tax. So that means as healthcare gets more expensive, taxes have to raise more money. And in the wake of the financial crisis, the British economy shrank, and every part of British government shrank too, but not the National Health Service. And in fact, health has to increase its costs and payments by about 4.3% each year to keep pace with an aging population and more expensive and effective treatments. But the British economy, even if it's running at its usual rate, grows at about 2 to 2.5%. And this means that healthcare costs are always going to be taking an increasingly large part of the UK national budget. Each government and every party tries to deal with this in different ways. The Conservative Party has an ideology of making cuts. the Labour Party has an ideology of making investments in the National Health Service. Voters will choose which of those they prefer, but when you ask them what they're interested in and what they're worried about, very often they'll say, yeah, it's the National Health Service that is our main priority. But for political commentators and for the political class themselves, Brexit is the big issue. But this seems somewhat odd because none of the parties give a very clear outline of what kind of Brexit they're looking for. This is particularly true of the government. The government says that it's in a difficult position and cannot outline its views and policies and direction on Brexit because that would give too much away of its negotiating stance. But that means Brexit seems unclear, and with the clock ticking, the Brexit process began in March and has 2 years to run, and really it must be completed within 18 months of that start in March. Business is getting a little bit worried. They need to make decisions about investments and where they're going to base their offices. So there have already been several examples of high-profile financial businesses, such as JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs, moving small parts of their operations onto mainland Europe. This is merely bolstering what they've already got as a presence within the EU 27 nations, and it's not stripping London of its status as a global financial centre, but it could be an indication that more jobs may go from London to other financial centres, perhaps even not within the EU, over the Brexit process and afterwards. Do you want anything about that building? This building. We'll have to go around the corner. This one.
OK，好的。
good. I'll start now. The UK polling system is based on geographic constituencies. At the moment, there are 650 constituencies. They usually have a similar amount of voters in each, anything from 70 to 110,000. Those constituencies will be redrawn in the next 5 years, and there will be fewer of them. But at the moment, 650, which means that to win, you need 326. This constituency is the constituency of Westminster, and we're on our way to a polling station in Pimlico, which is a famous and old district of London, nestling by the river. The polling station we're going to is in a church called St. Saviour's Church. Each of these polling stations covers a local area, and about 2,000 voters are registered in each of these local areas and are entitled to turn up and vote. But there's no law or regulation that says that they have to vote. Also, when they turn up, they are not expected to produce any proof of identity. They merely have to say who they are and what their address is. We should cross. Oh, good. Very good idea. We'll wait until we cross the road. It's too noisy otherwise. Cross here. In the wake of 3 terror attacks in the UK in the past 7 weeks, 2 of them in London, 1 of them in Westminster and 1 of them in the London Bridge area, security across the city has been strengthened. But it's not obvious on the streets. There don't appear to be that many more policemen around than there were beforehand. In fact, it seems likely that there are fewer policemen on duty because they may be needed later in the day. Around polling stations, it's been a tradition for the UK that policemen are not posted near polling stations. But there were reports in local media this morning that in the London area of Tower Hamlets, in the east of the city, which has a substantial Muslim population, there would be some policemen posted outside some polling stations to ward off what was labelled by the authorities as voter intimidation. This could be a case of people telling other people who to vote for, which is illegal. Nearly there. We're literally 2 minutes. Cross here.
Okay.
Oh, good.
I know. It's so funny because like.
Straight across.
Yeah. Woo! Yes, you're on TV.
Turn left here. What do you want me to say? Do you want to say something?
Wait.
Mm. This is a lot of fun. Are we doing the same tomorrow? Maybe not.
It's always different. I remember my first time to do a live is on March 22nd when the
that's
terror
no-
attack. I just keep saying before the bomb. I try to find someone about the data. Yeah, to answer these kind of questions.
Behind me is the polling station at St Saviour's Church in the North London district of Pimlico. We're only about half a mile away from Westminster itself, so this is one of the nearest polling stations to the Houses of Parliament. Each of these polling stations covers a little small district within a much larger constituency, and there are usually about 2,000 voters registered to vote at polling stations like these. They don't have to be church halls, they can sometimes be schools, any form of public building, sometimes even portable buildings. We were at the neighbouring polling station around the corner at 7 o'clock this morning, and we stayed there until 9 o'clock. And we saw a continuous stream of people coming in and out, like this gentleman is doing right now behind me. It's now about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. This would traditionally be the quietest time for polling. People are at work, the people who've already wanted to vote have done so. Other people will vote when they come home on their way back from work, or when they're at home and they've finished their meal for the day. So if we were here at 7 o'clock in the evening, we would see more and more people coming. But we've been here about 10 minutes now, and we've only seen maybe 6 people come in. Not quite sure how many have come out. If it's less than 6, then we don't quite know what they're doing in there. Polling shuts at 10 o'clock, and in previous elections, a poll has shut with huge queues of people outside, causing something of a scandal. The anger that arose after that has resulted in changes in rules, and these rules are now posted at polling stations. They say that if you turn up at the polling station and you're in the queue, they will give you a polling card and you'll get a chance to vote. So you could be voting and putting your vote in the ballot box after the polls have officially closed. But they say that the rules mean because you joined the queue before 10 o'clock, you've registered to vote. Tell me when we're okay to get somebody. Do it now. Oh, excuse me, sir. We're from Chinese television. Okay. Oh, hello. We're from Chinese television. Would you like to tell us about the... okay. Excuse me, sir, we're from Chinese television. Wow. Yeah. Today is very bad.
I can hold the microphone, so
thank you.
it's becoming.
Let me get the microphone, then we can do it. Okay. If you come here,
Yeah.
there we go.
Yeah, that's really.
So I'll ask you the questions.
Yep.
Ready? It's live. That's what it's Beijing.
Oh, really? Well, I can only do a bit of Cantonese. I can't speak
right.
Mandarin. I can't speak Mandarin, so stick to English.
You've just voted here at St Saviour's in Pimlico. What have been the big issues for you in the general election?
The obvious one, security, closely followed by Brexit, and for me, because I've got kids, some kind of legacy for them. Well, Brexit and then the environment, for me, is the next one, and then NHS, public services. Yeah, probably in that order, really.
Are there any local issues that have interested you?
Well, not so much because of family. Having two kids, bigger picture is always more important for me personally. So more than locally. So, and obviously the big ones: security, Brexit,
And how do you
environment.
think the election is going to go? Who do you think is going to win?
I guess it's probably going to be Conservative, but not by the landslide that they may have anticipated when Theresa May first called the election. But you can never tell. Exactly. The way the last year has been, with Brexit, and then obviously across the pond with what happened there, it could be anybody's guess. And then obviously what's happened in the last 2 to 3 weeks.
With the terror attacks?
Yeah, absolutely. So it just rolls the dice.
Not quite the election you expected 7 weeks ago?
No, absolutely not. And
Yeah.
I think they say, isn't it, a week is a long time in politics. And
This is a British saying, a week is a long
it's
time in politics.
very true with this one. So
Who did you vote
that's-
for? You don't have to tell us. You can if you want.
I'd rather not say. I'll keep
Thank
it a
you for
secret.
your time.
You will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's just such a personal thing. I want to share it with the family. Me, the family.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, I think we're Finished. Shall I do a piece? Let me think what to say. What time is it now? Count me in. So the election will finish in about 5.5 hours' time at 10 o'clock. Right now, the Prime Minister, Theresa May, is not at her residence in Downing Street, which is just about 1.5 miles from here. She's at her constituency in Maidenhead, which is just outside London. She'll stay there for the result. We're not quite sure what time that result will be, But it's not a huge constituency, and it's not a very big rural constituency, which means that getting the votes together should be quite easy, and they may be able to declare there about 2 o'clock. It seems certain that the Prime Minister will be returned in her own constituency. There are no examples of British Prime Ministers getting voted out at general elections they've called. But it's not certain if she will be Prime Minister tomorrow. It looks highly likely according to the polls, but what kind of majority is she going to have? Will she have a stronger government than the one she holds at the moment, or a weaker one? At the moment, she has a majority of 17 seats in the 650-seat House of Commons. Some pollsters say that could increase to 50, perhaps even 70. But it's a long way from the landslide that was predicted when she went for the general election 7 weeks ago, when some people were saying she would be 126, 150, maybe even 200-seat majority. But we will know certainly by tomorrow morning, maybe 4 or 5 o'clock.